Cyber Nation Uncensored.
Hello everybody, and welcome to another installment of Tales from the Forlorn Dopes. I'm your host, Cybersmily.
I'm your co-host, Wisdom000.
And
we had a guest scheduled for today, but they had to reschedule for the next episode.
yes,
So instead today, there goes my. So instead today, we're going to talk about game theory in general and the influence corporations have on your cyberpunk games.
yes. But before we get to that, things in Cyberpunk news. The only thing that I think is of any relevance is that the pre-order for the new combat zone ends today.
Yeah, it looks freaking awesome. I sure wish that I could get my hands on that. I still haven't been able to get a copy of a lot of stuff. It's not even funny, guys. I'm trying. Also, Cyberpunk Edgerunners has gone to print. That's kind of big news.
Yep. So that's at the printer, and I have a feeling that they're probably going to start announcing it soon. Maybe in the next month, maybe less. I think they
our next episode, we might have more news on the subject.
or a version of it already out.
Not to give anything away, but so that's still super exciting. That'll let you play, 2077, with the red rules as an official product. I know there have been many fan projects that have tried to approach this, but this will be the first time an official product has been released that directly ties into 2077. Even if it's through the anime, which I guess takes place in 2076, but, what's a year?
Yep. But yeah, so, last year's Gen Con, I did do a demo of some of the, I would say, initial kind of rules, but it was more equipment, not necessarily additional rules. There were additional rules to the system, right? And to me, the quick hacks.
Yeah, like the quick hack rules and.
Yeah. So some of the quick hacks, I hope they change from the initial, that initial ruling. There is one ability that I found kind of overpowered with quick hacks, which is a kind of the ability is it combines some of the quick hacks like detonate grenade, suicide, and I think there's one other one in which you basically take control of the target, right? And I was looking at the percentage chance of success, right, with that. And if you're a net runner with like a 10, you have a 99% chance that you're going to be able to do that quick hack on that person, which means suicide.
That's pretty.
Yeah.
That's pretty powerful.
I hope they increase those difficulty numbers. I gave my feedback. But yeah, that was...
Yeah, I mean, the whole purpose of them playtesting it is to sort out stuff like that. So hopefully they'll take your input into account.
And they might actually deal with or change all the rules, right, and how that whole thing works. Maybe giving players a bit more resistance than it was in the rules as written, at least at the time. But yeah, those rules they have fun, especially some of the tech weapons and the power weapons, which they wrote rules. And I'm sure there's going to be additional equipment that they kind of analyzed from edgerunners that were part of Cyberpunk 2077, but also were in the anime itself. One other thing that I would love to find out is what was the summit that they kind of teased at a few weeks ago. So there was a picture, I think it was on Twitter, of the Artausorian crew and some of the CDPR crew hanging out, and they were saying, hey, we're going to be going to our summit, which sounds like bigger news coming down the pipe, especially as 2077 is still in development, the next version of it. When I say in development, I don't mean development coding, but like design and figuring out what they're going to be doing.
I would assume it probably has to do with advertising for edgerunners.
Yeah.
And last minute lookovers to make sure everything is coherent and consistent with both the game, both Red and 2077, and that they're not giving away, that neither side is giving away any big secrets that they're wanting to keep under wraps or that are going to conflict with anything. I mean, it's also possible that it has to do with Project Orion, and that would be very cool to get some news about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're. I think they learned their lesson from 2077, and they're being much more tight-lipped about development of Orion. They're not making big announcements. They're not putting out teaser trailers or anything like that 7 years in advance. They're just letting us know that it's something that they're working on.
Well, I think that thing from 2013 was kind of a promotional to get players,
proof of concept,
an advertisement for people. Hey, come join the company because we're about to work on this.
Yeah, and just in general, keep the hype up, because if they had actually waited till 2020 to start advertising it, I mean, at that point, I think they made the right move with the original teaser trailer to let people know it was coming, and then the updates along the way were fine. It was like a year ahead of time though when they really started trying to hype it up, or maybe 2 years, and things kept changing. Like I remember that original like gameplay thing where they still had the option to where you could climb up walls, and the subway was going to be a big deal, or the metro transit system. So there's always things that are going to change, and I think that's where they made their mistake. Is there was also the big conference they had where they listed all the different things you would be able to do in the game, and like half that list was taken out. I think they need to avoid that. at least until they've got, until the final product is in sight. Like, this is what it's going to look like. This is how it's going to be.
Holy shit. Sorry.
What happened?
So, just FYI to our audience, I don't know if I'm sure if you've been listening to us for a while, we've been trying to track down an artist called Douglas Anderson.
Yeah.
Wisdom has found him, and I have just found confirmation that it is him. I found a piece of art from BattleTech with his signature on it, and it matches to the landscape art from that artist's webpage.
Told you it was him.
Well,
So yeah, we have tracked him down. Now we just need to get him to answer us.
Yeah.
I sent an email, but I haven't heard anything back yet.
Yeah, so
there's a couple of other options we have. I'm just including what I think is his phone number. I'm very leery about pulling the trigger on that because I don't know. It seems really creepy to try and just call somebody up out of the blue.
Well, I know Mike Pondsmith is also looking for him.
Yeah.
So maybe you'll get a bounty reward.
Yeah, wouldn't that be neat? But yeah, we're very hopeful we can get a hold of him and schedule an interview, or at least just some kind of word from him.
Yeah,
he's all the most iconic covers were done by Mr. Anderson, and we would very much like to have him on the show, just to show him how much we appreciate his work.
Yep. Yes, definitely. Yeah, so what we talk about 2077, and where we're at with that. Yeah, I don't know if any other news, at least from the video game tabletop.
Yeah, I don't know what the free DLC this month is.
It hasn't hit yet.
Yeah, I don't know what it's supposed to be.
Well, it could be that they're, if the kit is at the printers, there's a good chance that the DLC is going to be some type of combination with the release. I mean, we still have 2 weeks left in this month.
Yeah, one would assume that it would try and tie in just in some way or other with the edgerunners release.
Yep.
But there's really no telling until they say something. Again, we'll know something by the next episode.
That is true. So, in other news, a teaser for Megalopolis has come out. It's from Francis Ford
Coppola. Yeah, I'm excited about that one. I've never seen a Coppola film that I didn't enjoy. I don't know exactly. Like, the teaser looks really cool. It's very dystopic. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about that one.
Kind of reminds me of, was it the Stevenson novel? It wasn't Islands in the Net. Maybe it was Islands in the Net. It was the...
Yeah,
one
I
of
can
the
see that. I can see it.
Cyberpunk that was very... The rich were, like, living pretty much in a separate world,
Yeah, kind of like Elysium in that regard, where the rich just they don't even associate with the dirty poors anymore.
Yeah. Another thing that crossed my path was humane. In the wake of an environmental collapse that is forcing humanity to shed 20% of its population, the family dinner erupts into chaos when a father's plan to enlist the government's new euthanasia program goes horribly awry.
I haven't heard about that one yet.
Yeah, it's starring Jay Baruchel, Emily Hampshire. Don't know if it's coming out on a specific station or what, but seems dystopian future, so that's kind of something I also found. I also came across something called The Kitchen, which apparently came out last year, but it might not be hitting anything until for the States. It's in a dystopian future London where all social housing has been eliminated. Izzy and Benji fight to navigate the world as residents of The Kitchen, a community that refuses to abandon their home. So it sounds like kind of like urban renewal and people fighting back.
Yeah.
Another one that's coming out, or has come out, 2024, Badland Hunters. Looks like a Korean film.
Yeah, I've got that on my my definite must-watch list. That sounds like a cross of cyberpunk and post-apocalypse, and
Looks like
it looks pretty good.
Inspiration for Nomad's campaign.
Yeah, and Korean cinema does action and especially revenge type stuff really, really well. So definitely looking forward to that.
Yeah, trailer came out for that. Some visuals for the Electric State, which is something with Millie Bobby Brown. About a person wandering the American West with a mysterious robots.
I did finally see the trailer for Atlas, and yeah, it looks pretty damn good. I gotta say.
With Jennifer Lopez.
Yeah, with Jennifer Lopez. I mean, say what you will about her. I think she's made some pretty good movies. I really enjoyed The Cell. But the movie itself, like the setting for the movie, is pretty solidly cyberpunk.
Yep.
There's also some giant robot stuff, which isn't necessarily my thing, but it looks good to me. I'm definitely gonna watch it.
Well, I think I see a lot of people mention about APCs or ACPAs and other power armor and how much they want it or looking forward to using it. So I think you probably get some inspiration on how to integrate those into your Cyberpunk game.
Exactly. Let me see.
There's another movie that has come out, which was in 2023, but I don't think it has hit here yet because I believe it's a French film. It's called The Beast. The description is, in the near future, artificial intelligence is in control of everyone's lives and human emotions are perceived as a threat. It looks like there's kind of like a cross between virtual reality as the main antagonist tries to navigate what is real, I think. But it also looks kind of like a love story as well. I want to say, is this actress?
My bad, I lost sound there for a minute.
Yeah. Oh, this is the main characters from the James Bond's movies, Spectre and No Time to Die. I think it was his love interest.
Oh, the chick.
Yeah.
I liked her.
Laissez doubt.
I can't.
Do.
Yeah, I
So
can't remember
do.
her name off the top of my head, but
I forget how you're supposed to pronounce O-U-X. It's like ooh.
do. Ledoux.
Do. Something else that crossed my path, and I don't know if this is a movie, a television series, a game trailer, but it's Terminator Skynet Rising.
That's going to be an anime, and it's supposed to be like a slasher film. So I don't know. I always get excited about anything Terminator. Half the time I get tremendously disappointed, although I really liked the last one. I know I'm in the minority on that, but I certainly liked it more than anything else that came after 2.
I mean, the trailer looks interesting.
Yeah, I mean it looks like it's going to be very, very violent, which is what the Terminator needs to be.
Yeah, and because of, I wasn't sure if it was a video game because of just how the graphics were.
Yeah, as far as I know, it's supposed to be a series on. It's either a series or a movie, but it'll be coming out on Netflix, I believe. They had a Terminator video game done by the same people who did the RoboCop game. It wasn't very good.
And
Like, some people like it a lot, but I didn't care for it.
and for those who were big action fans of the 80s movies, Chuck Norris is in a movie called Agent Recon.
Oh, that's got to be embarrassing.
Yeah, it looks like it's alien tech. And they're going in and fighting people with alien tech and superpowers, so I don't know. I'm not 100% sure if it's really cyberpunk, but it's definitely a sci-fi flick. Oh, looks like Chuck Norris is a robot of some sort.
How much you want to bet everything but his face gets pretty much destroyed in the first, 10 minutes of the movie? Because, I mean, I don't hate Chuck Norris. I hate the memes surrounding him. I kind of ignore who he's turned into in his old age. But I have a great love for, his 70s and 80s movies.
And Mark Singer's in
And
it.
nothing will ever. Holy shit, Mark Singer is still alive? That's fucking awesome.
Yeah. Those who don't know who Mark
But
Singer is, he was the main guy from the first version.
He was also the Beastmaster, the original Beastmaster.
Yep, the original Beastmaster. Yep. That too.
He had a couple of other roles, but those are the ones that people remember him for. I liked Mark Singer. He did a movie called "If You Could See What I Hear," about a blind pianist. It's based on a real story. The guy's name that he played eludes me at the moment. I haven't seen the movie since the 80s, but it was a pretty good drama. He did the part well, and I loved V. That was one of those series in the 80s that just blew everybody away. At least the 2 miniseries. The actual show was kind of... It's one of those that their
that's right. They did
vision
a show
exceeded
afterwards.
the budget. Yeah, and it ended on this big cliffhanger, and they never ever picked it up again. As a kid, I loved Beastmaster. As an adult, today I watch it and Jesus, that's some problematic stuff. It's not something you want to I don't know. The action's still good in it. The special effects are still, for a B movie, they were great in the '80s. The overall concept was good, but as a character, Dar had some issues. But yeah, it was one of those Conan ripoffs that did very well. Like it ripped it off well. Certainly better than any of the other like direct Conan ripoffs, except for maybe I have a deep abiding love for Sword and the Sorcerer. I always will. But yeah, I'm getting way off topic here.
Well, I mean, we were just going over, the cinema that's coming out, but yeah, I mean, if you like, eight or any of these, or his previous stuff, then it's well worth it. Take a look to see what he's doing today. So,
Michelle Yeoh has been cast in Blade Runner 2099.
That's right.
That's pretty good news. The early images I've seen from that look fantastic. Michelle Yeoh has reached a point in her career where I think she just does what she wants. She's like fairly picky with her projects. I say that, but she did that like
Horrible Richard.
Bubblegum milkshake or whatever it was, which was awful. But
I didn't mind that. The one thing that I didn't like that she did recently was the what was it? Witcher Bloodlines. Is that?
Yeah, that wasn't great. But I mean, after the success of Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, I don't know. Again, deep abiding love for Michelle Yeoh, deep abiding love for anything Blade Runner related. I'm all in on Blade Runner 2099. Ridley Scott himself is producing. Hopefully that means he won't like rip it apart like he did the Aliens series, but yeah, I'm excited to see it. She also just put out Brother's Son.
Yes.
Which isn't necessarily cyberpunk, but it's definitely. I mean, she's a hitman. Or a hit woman, I guess. It's an interesting film. Yeah. I very much enjoyed it. Or not film series, but
it's a martial arts triad comedy.
Yeah, it takes place in Taipei, this giant city. It's not cyberpunk. I wouldn't even say it's necessarily cyberpunk adjacent, but it could definitely be used as inspiration for your cyberpunk games, in the same way that Reservoir Dogs or Pulp Fiction could.
Definitely. Well,
especially if your games run more towards the fun side of stuff.
Yeah, so that's our news, as it were, of things that are cyberpunk that are coming out. Yeah, let's get into it. Corporations and campaigns and how much of an impact they have. So, I guess we can start with, how much authority do corporations have in your game world? And again, this is not only per GM, but it's also per campaign of how much you want to do that with and how much authority they have. For most of the campaigns I have, the corporations do kind of outrank any type of government or municipality authority, and are able to get away with a lot more than corporations in the current world, even though corporations in the current world can get away with quite a bit too.
See, in my game, corporations can get away with a lot, and at local government level, they can push their weight around. But on a national level, not quite so much. Sure, they can influence. They can buy members of the judiciary branches and all that. But they don't have the power to like overtly just take everything over. Craig Shealy just dropped an essay on Facebook. You can find it on the Cyberpunk 2020 group, the Red group, and the Datafortress2020 group, where he goes into detail on his views of things, and my views align with those for the most part. Especially in the terms of like military and infrastructure. Like, you don't want the corporations, even the corporations don't want the corporations controlling the roads. Like, that is one corporation just making a ton of money at the expense of all the others. That's not going to fly. That's not going to fly with the public. Yes, Arasaka provides like police forces around the world, but mostly that's going to be in third world nations. Like a large city, I get that they're trying to do the OCP from RoboCop thing, where they're just taking over the police. But even then, Arasaka is not gonna be concerned about things outside their own purview, and the other corporations aren't gonna go for that either. They're not gonna allow one corporation to just have absolute control over, law enforcement in a city. That's not going to benefit anyone but Arasaka. No corporate military is ever going to be able to topple the United States military, for instance. Like, it's just not going to happen. I get what they're going for with the game and trying to imply that that's how it works. Especially with, the fourth corporate book. But even then, when the U.S. military does finally step in, that ends the whole thing, because you can't compete with that.
Yeah.
That is a monster with a bottomless pit for a budget. And you don't want... Like, we've seen how private control of what should be federal institutions has just turned into a mess. The best example I can give is privatized prisons, which have just basically become, slave labor camps. That's certainly the most egregious, but yeah, like allowing corporations to control any type of infrastructure is a bad idea. The only roads that'll get repaired are the ones that they need personally for their transporting. Like it's just, it would be a bad idea, and it doesn't work.
Right.
Like, it would never work in the long run for any society.
Yeah, because you need, if you're a big corporation, you definitely want to have some type of neutral party, right, or buffer.
Yeah.
Because you're looking to exploit profits, not waste them. And
exactly, and things like infrastructure, those aren't money-making ventures.
No,
they're not there. Like, you can't make a profit. Just like the U.S. Postal Service, that doesn't make a profit, but it is a necessary, absolutely necessary function of our government.
Yep.
Libraries don't make a profit. That's not what they exist for. And if you turn them into a privatized institution, suddenly the library is no longer a library. It's a propaganda machine.
Right. Yeah, so yeah, for me, when it comes to corporations, I try to you know, trying to think exactly how to put this. They're always a bad guy, right? Even the ones that are supposedly good are bad.
Yeah. I mean, even the ones that make a positive impact, because they are a profit-led entity, they can never be the good guy. Because where there's profit, there's always exploitation.
Exactly. So I often try to, and I'm thinking back to the campaigns I'm running now. I mean, like for example, the one campaign that I'm running now, which is a High Rider campaign, ESA really is controlling the world, and corporations really don't have as much influence as they want. But those corporations are also either working alongside with ESA, or they're trying to manipulate the High Riders, right? Because, in my opinion, in that situation, the corporations still want to be in space and see the High Riders as something that they have to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain things that, manufactured in space, that's going to be the only way to really get the best product. All the telecommunication companies, they require satellites. Those satellites require some level of upkeep unless you just keep shooting them. But then there's all this space debris flying around that, is dangerous to everybody. Corporations need, that's why the Crystal Palace is such a big deal. And the ESA and the USAF, they really have a lockdown on what's happening in orbit. Depending on how far along your game has run, you could be, in the stages of terraforming Mars and all that. But yeah, I mean, corporations need to operate there, and could you imagine what space would look like if there weren't an ESA up there, or an NS, or an ESA to regulate what's happening? Can you imagine the amount of just trash floating around in space?
Well, that's, is the U.S., right, is currently trying to is tracking all that as well, right?
Yeah.
To make sure that nothing is going to destroy them, as it were. So, but yeah, again, it's a
I mean, NASA has to keep track of something like, 1 million plus objects in low Earth orbit. So, and adjust the ISS to keep it from being impacted by all these objects. I mean, a simple screw traveling at, I don't know what the speed is up there, but it's like 2,400 miles per hour or some ridiculous shit like that, impacting the ISS could be absolutely catastrophic.
right.
And without any kind of regulations at all, it suddenly, it's impossible to be in that space. as you have to have regulations. There has to be somebody preventing just mass exploitation of any resource, even space itself, without any care for what comes in the future. And corporations, they don't think long term; they think immediate profit.
Right.
At the cost of everything else. Here on Earth, we see what happens when regulations are lifted. We see what happens when regulations are ignored. We get things like the BP oil spill. We get things like, the meat industry poisoning half the country. We get without regulations, the world would be a much more terrifying place. I know that's not to get political, but that's the big idea behind libertarianism, is to, get government control out of that stuff. But no, I'm of the opinion that, some things the government does are necessary and required.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, you want to take a look at how corporations are doing. Even the fighting of corporations, right, is always going to be subtle. I think that's the hard thing to kind of portray, is the webs of deceit that corporations will go through, and keeping your players, I guess, attitude towards wanting to learn more, right, and pushing them to want to seek out what is the truth, which can be sometimes hard. I found that anytime I'm running a mystery, and this is not only for Cyberpunk but also Call of Cthulhu, is if you don't have the really blatant clues out there, players will get lost and they'll start stumbling around, not knowing where to go.
Yeah, that can definitely happen.
So you always want to keep at least any type of corporate intrigue a little more obvious and kind of in their face. Which, of course, you're starting to get away from trying to have some type of realism in your game to the over-the-top action film that the game often leads to. I
mean, I don't mean to say that corporations can't be insanely powerful. They can. And when they move into like a third world underdeveloped country, they can absolutely take over, and they have. I mean, look at Dole Fruit or the East India Trading Company or Monsanto. Like, their power and influence can just, move in and take over everything. But that's not going to happen. Anyway, as to what you were saying, I forget what you were saying. I'm sorry.
Just talking, just
trying to bring it back, and I forgot where I was going.
Right. So, a corporate intrigue, right? And getting into that. Because there should be corporate intrigue, right? A corporation doing bad things wants to have deniable assets, and those deniable assets are usually going to be shell corporations, right? Perfect example is when we were talking about the Land of the Free. The clone was part of a company that you later to come to find out was really run by Biotechnica. But the players really don't learn that until later in the campaign.
Yeah, and in the meantime, you've got Arasaka trying to track them down. You've got all these other third parties trying to get their hands in the pie. And then, you know, like you said, Biotechnica's the big reveal. It's as the ones behind the whole thing. See, that's the problem with the Firestorm books. The first Firestorm is very much corporate intrigue. It's very much espionage oriented, and it's very much the way corporate conflict would play out. And then with the second book, it turns into G.I. Joe versus Cobra, to be honest.
That is so true.
Yeah, over the top, like a worldwide global conflict between two corporations, which, if you look at it, makes zero sense. Like, what profit could there possibly be from either side to this giant conflict? And there's no way that the, you know, militaries in the first world nations where this is happening are going to let this slide, which is why the U.S. eventually, or the U.S. military eventually steps in. But that happens way too late. And when they do, they come in and they're like, well, we're just going to nuke their headquarters. Like, the fuck? In the middle of a civilian city. Yeah, it just goes from espionage and corporate intrigue to, like I said, G.I. Joe versus Cobra, where just both sides have unlimited budgets that seem to come from nowhere, and nobody answers to anybody. They're just there to fight.
Yeah, and
like not even the comic book G.I. Joe versus Cobra. We're talking straight up cartoon G.I. Joe versus Cobra. Like, I expect the Weather Dominator to make an appearance, or the Mass Device. I'm so fucking old.
But that, to me, that's, I never really thought about how much it was like G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
Now it makes me want to go watch some G.I. Joes and start coming up with scenarios based on those cartoons.
I mean, it wouldn't be hard. And honestly, I think the red rules kind of play into that. Like,
yeah. At the end of every session, one of the players has to come up with a moral statement.
Knowing is half the battle.
Hey, Jimmy, brain dance is bad for you. You want to get off of that once in a while and go out and play. Thanks, Duke. No problem. Kid runs off.
Never sign a corporate contract without reading the fine print, Jimmy.
Well, the background would be the kid going out into the street and joining the gang while Duke is sitting there and is like, knowing is half the battle. So, kid getting into worse situation than he was when he was, you know, inside. But anyways, but yeah, so you definitely want to try to keep your, especially if it's like the intrigue scenarios. And corporate fighting amongst themselves. It really should be kind of, I don't know, low key. I think one of the best series was Incorporated when it came to cyberpunk corporations.
Oh, absolutely! Like it got it absolutely right.
And there was some films from the 80s. I forgot who the author was, but like Barbarians at the Gate and Weapons of Mass Destruction, I always liked as like a high level corporate battle amongst themselves, right? And the espionage that they did.
Like, that's where most of the espionage in the world takes place, is through corporations. It's very profitable to know what your rivals are doing, how they're doing it, and if you can do it better or cheaper yourself. That's why, trade secrets are such closely guarded bits and pieces. Formula for Coca-Cola. Two people in the world know it, and they can never be on the same plane at the same time. I remember the recipe for, Kentucky Fried Chicken's extra spicy chicken. That was a closely guarded secret for a long time.
Yes. Those things were.
These, like, corporate secrets, everybody wants to think of, like research development projects in their Cyberpunk games being like, okay, you're going to steal this prototype gun or motorcycle, but it's every bit as likely and every bit as valid that you're going to steal the formula for, a new soft drink, or, a new type of rubber for tires. I mean, all these things are valid. It doesn't always have to be guns and cybernetics. Like, corporations are going to do everything they can to make money, and some of the most closely guarded secrets are like the most mundane, everyday shit in your house.
Yep. So we talked about corporations and kind of like at least how to integrate them into the game. I think the next thing that, as a referee, you would want to think about is assets, right? How many assets does a corporation have? How willingly are they willing to put those assets on the line? To do the dirty deeds that they want done.
Exactly. 100%. Like, everybody treats, not everybody obviously, but lots of people treat, any corporation as just being this inexhaustible pit of money that can throw, whatever resources they've got. That's why the corporate books were so important, is because they do list those resources. They do list, how many security personnel they have in the form of troops or whatever. They do list, what their budget is. If you're creating a corporation in the cyberpunk world, big or small, these are the things you have to take into consideration. You have to consider how many shareholders are in the company, or at least how many of the controlling board there are. Is it publicly traded? Is it man, I am so sorry. My brain is just not functioning today. I took a pain pill earlier, and it just...
I know.
I didn't want to before the podcast, but it's got me feeling kind of goofy, and I apologize to everybody for that. But yeah, corporate resources, like, these things are important to know. And it's very important to know, as a GM, the on-site resources of any, like, if you're doing a raid on some corporate warehouse, you have to know how many people are in that warehouse. You have to know how loyal those security guards are going to be once the bullets start flying. If it's some low rent fly-by-night corporation, those guys aren't going to necessarily want to throw their lives away for, whatever secret might be hidden in that warehouse. They're most likely certainly not going to be compensated high enough to risk their lives for that. They're most likely going to be just regular security guards going about their business. If it is something where they are, like, super loyal and super skilled, solos and whatnot, then there needs to be enough there to provide for that.
And I think you also, when dealing with something like that, is how far is the corporation willing to go, right? To either settle a score or deal with the party, right?
Yeah,
You're always going to have, sure, you might have that corporate manager, vice president, whatever, willing to go to the lengths to destroy the party. However, if he's constantly wasting resources trying to kill the party, that corporation might be like, it's, it's not really worth it, right? So,
yeah, you're throwing away all our money chasing these guys down. The press is going to get wind of that shit, especially if there's any, collateral damage. That's going to lead to bad press, which is going to hurt the company. Corporations are profit-driven entities, and while one corporate, one member of the executive board might get a stick up his butt about what you've done, they're not going to put those profits at risk beyond what they think you're worth.
yep.
So that's more to keep in mind. Corporations are tricky business. Like, they are these large entities that exist to make money. And sure, they will use their money and influence to sway things to happen for their benefit, and oftentimes they'll team up with other corporations, even their rivals, to push this government influence. But at the end of the day, every single one of them still answers to their shareholders. It still answers to, if they're selling a product to the public, they're beholden to the public. They can't take the bad press because that costs them money. Look at Subway. When the whole Jared Fogle thing came about, they just their profits fucking bottomed out. I'm actually kind of surprised they're still in business.
Yeah.
Again, I'm getting off on a tangent, but corporations are the baddies in the cyberpunk world, more so than the government, because they do influence people's lives. They put out these products that everybody needs. So I'm not trying to take away from that. And if you're creating your own corporation, I'm just saying these are things you need to take into account. With the pre-existing corporations, things like resources and all that, they're already pretty well laid out in the book. So it all comes down to how much detail you want to give to your corporation if you're going to make them the big baddie in your game.
Yeah, and I don't think you necessarily need to plan out everything and keep track of every.
Oh no, and most of that'll
bit.
come out while you're playing as needs arise. But the big things like resources and number of personnel, those should probably be thought out beforehand.
Exactly. Just so you have at least a map, and I don't think you necessarily have to go into too much detail when creating a corporation. I also think that it should be you should come up with like when fleshing out an adversary for a corporation is you don't really care about the high level things going on.
Oh, something just happened to the feed there.
Yeah. How long? Basically, it switched to showing my desktop.
Your desktop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is.
I think you didn't have any naughty pictures going on.
Yeah, I don't have naughty pictures. Too old for that shit.
No.
Was doing a little computer work for my wife. Anyways, so for a corporation, you want to flesh out at least a small department and go down to a smaller level. Because if you think like examples of corporations, if you think like with RoboCop, right? So the main bad villain of the corporation was one guy who's in charge of one department within the bigger corporation of OCP.
Yeah.
He was doing something nefarious, and I think that's where a lot of the themes come from, is those smaller mid-management guys who are doing things that upper management are happy that they're turning a profit, but the upper management also really doesn't want to know exactly what they're doing.
They will turn a blind eye to whatever, their heads of department or whoever is doing, as long as the profit is still coming in. The minute that profit turns south or they start getting too scrutinized, they're going to cut that person loose. Dick Jones, you're fired. Blam.
Exactly.
When you're dealing with a corporation as large as OCP or Arasaka or Militech, that's super cutthroat fucking world. That's, it may not always be direct life or death, like we're going to shoot you in the boardroom, but, you take a guy who's a high-level executive who, the corporation pays for his, luxury penthouse, his personal AV5, his medical insurance, his food. He gets fresh food. He gets clean clothes by designer brands. You suddenly strip that shit away, and you might as well have killed that dude. He's got no survival instincts. He's basically a child on the streets who's just... And what's worse is he's going to be a child on the streets with a sense of entitlement.
Yep.
It's a cutthroat world, and the threat of losing that shit is every bit as dire as somebody with a gun to your head. Every move you make in the corporate sphere is a gamble, and you're playing for the highest stakes imaginable, not only your own, that affect not only your own life, but those of everyone under you, the consumers themselves, and the corporation as a whole. And that's a hard. When you're playing one of the big boys, that's a tightrope to walk. Let me tell you.
Yeah. So
and Incorporated did that fucking beautifully.
Yeah, and so you want to, at least when you're designing a game, have that type of capability, right? And also come up with some of their lieutenants to also kind of present them as the first line that the players are going to see. And as the battle continues, or the scenarios continue, that's when you reveal to your party the larger hierarchy. And you also can do things within your story to kind of like even have that VP be like, well, I didn't know what Johnson was doing, but thank you for
deniability.
Yeah, but thank you for presenting that information.
Thanks for bringing this problem to our attention. We will deal with it quickly and decisively. In the meantime, here's a new bicycle for your kids. Try it out.
Right.
What the fuck?
Well, that that VP will now know, okay, they know me, so I need to start behaving a little better, right? And making sure
Or
that
yeah, or at least much more underhanded. Like keep the shit under the table.
right.
Be extra careful because you're now being scrutinized even more so than before. Um, and of course, you can have your evil like corporate executives. You can have your Largo from Bubblegum Crisis, or your Dick Jones from RoboCop. Your like these villains work, and they're succinctly cyberpunk villains. Um, Corporations are the big baddie. They are, if not the source of all the evil in the cyberpunk world, certainly the majority of it. Because profits take place over anything else. Every corporation that that does donate to charities, that promotes humanitarian efforts or ecological conservation, they're doing it because it's in their own best interest to do it. They're not doing it out of any real sense of benevolence. It's all a tax write-off, basically,
Yep.
or just something as simple as goodwill in the press. Like that goes a long way.
That it does.
So, how you let corporations influence your games can, like we've said, be a very, very, very it can be a delicate spider web, depending on how you run your games, how realistic you want them to be, how whether it's going to be a long-term campaign or a one-shot. With a one-shot, it doesn't matter. Like you don't have to worry about the corporation's motives or any of that. It's just faceless villains. Like if you're running a con game, you just give it a corporation. They're the bad guys. They do these bad things. But if you're running a long-term game where these things matter, it's very much in your game's best interests to give some thought to this kind of stuff.
Yes.
And as far as like influencing your game, you can look at the real world and see just how terrible corporations are. I mentioned Monsanto, and when I think of Biotechnica, Monsanto is what comes to mind. Like, Monsanto's control over agriculture worldwide is unsurmountable. They have successfully sued farmers who are just like adjacent to farms where their crops are being grown, and as the wind blows and their strains of whatever drift over to another farmer's crops, and suddenly that farmer is growing these crops. They have successfully sued to basically shut that farmer down. In the third world, they'll sell fertilizer that the plants require, and then the next year they will change that fertilizer in minor ways, and without that specific fertilizer for the seeds that Monsanto is selling them, the plants won't grow. Or if they do, they're like malformed, pitiful things. And yet Monsanto grows most of the food, most of the fruits and vegetables in the world. They are a necessary evil at this point. They are so big, we cannot allow them to fail. And that's terrifying.
Yes.
And that's how I see Biotechnica. You can't allow. I mean, obviously in the game you can allow whatever the hell you want, but we have allowed these corporations to reach this size and reach this level of influence. However, even then, Biotechnica or Monsanto still relies on, government laws, government roads, government blah blah blah, the infrastructure. But yeah, corporations can wield enormous influence in your game. They can destroy, basically, if they're a really large corporation, if they've really got the influences. I can see them shutting down a city, even in America. I mean, look at all the corporations that poison the water supplies of the areas surrounding them, and for the most part, get away with it. Like, yeah, corporations are evil, and they are. They are in many cases untouchable by, the individual.
Well, so yeah, and that's kind of what you need to portray, especially in a dystopian future. How the corporations really have taken over everything, and what they're willing to do to squash their enemies. To make sure the world is better. Yeah. So, Raver's Hammer, basically, Biotechnica cares and is very compassionate. And yeah, that's where you want to get into the
corporation
whole...
here to make sure the world is a better place. In other words, shut your mouth, you dirty communist, and the computer tells you to take another pill. That's awesome, Raven.
But yeah, so that's kind of how you want to portray them. But they're also making sure that they don't piss off other corporations as well. Because even though Firestorm kind of set the two largest corporations off on each other, those are the exceptions, right? Because they are really big guns with something to prove. And I think the smaller corporations, especially like corporations like Infotech, who are there to spy on everything and know everything. And IEC, who is trying to, well, at the time they were trying to take over, a lot of the manufacturing of the world. And probably have rivalry with quite a few corporations, Arasaka being one of the bigger ones.
Yeah, if Merrill, Asukaga, and Finch decide they don't want to put up with your bullshit anymore, and they cut off, your access to basically the worldwide banking system, you're fucked. And if you're a small corporation trying to come up in the world of Cyberpunk, man, you've got to be careful not to step on anybody's toes. Because if your product is really great, you've got to worry every moment about one of the larger corporations. First, they'll try to buy you out. And then if you don't want to sell, they will take measures to, disappear you if you become a threat to them. Until you're large enough that shit would get noticed. So if you're a smaller corporation trying to break into a market that somebody else controls, you've got to be very quiet in the beginning. Make sure your product works. Make sure It's going to have public support before you start releasing it. Because if you're just some fly-by-night corporation, then you will get squashed like a bug. Which is one of those things that makes corporations so ruthless. Because if you can survive all that long enough to get any position of power, at that point you are so hardened and so deep in the game that you don't know any way else to be at that point.
Yep.
I'm sure that when Mark Zuckerberg, started Facebook, I mean, I don't know. I've seen the movies. I know he wasn't always the greatest dude and all that shit. Like, I would never consider him a great dude. But I'm sure when they started out, when they had no money, that there was still like, we're gonna change the world. We're bright-eyed idealists, or at least, naive enough to think that they're going to remain who they are. And now Zuckerberg is basically a robot. He's like,
Yeah.
no sense of that naive young guy who wanted to change the world for the better is going to remain.
Right, and I think a lot of, especially like the tech guys, often, especially like back in the the 90s, the 80s, a little bit of the early 2000s, you had kind of this developer IT mentality of information is free.
Yeah. Until it's your information.
Until it's your information, right? And until, wow, I can actually turn quite a bit of a profit here. So maybe my ideals of yore are not what I want to do anymore, right? Maybe I like my $300 million yacht. Oh my God, have you seen that thing?
Yeah, yeah. The any yacht where you can, I don't know, that thing's ridiculous. That
Yeah.
is.
So, and I think when you're designing your upper management, you have to look towards these guys, right? The Elon Musk, the Zuckerberg, the Gates, the Jesus Christ, why can't I remember his name? Amazon, Bezos, right? And those are the guys who have flash. There's other ultra rich people who aren't in the spotlight, who don't want that
Yeah, like,
light shined on them.
yeah, because nobody wants them to be looked at that close. Sorry about that.
You driving away?
Somebody is. But I mean, like, who owns Kraft? They're one of the largest corporations in the world. They control like a fourth of the food that gets produced in the country. I don't know who sits on top of that shit. I don't know off the top of my head who the CEOs of Coca-Cola are.
Right.
I couldn't tell you who like the CEO of Philip Morris, the cigarette company, is. They don't want that information known. They don't want themselves talked about on a regular basis.
Yep. So yeah, I mean, you want to. I would say do a little bit of research. There used to be the libraries used to have an actual corporate profile, but I think most of those corporate profiles you can find online, right? And take a look at that corporate profile. Pick another big company and take a look at. Now, I work in the corporate world right now, but just seeing and understanding exactly how different departments even work in a corporation is interesting because, and even though I work for IT and kind of have my finger on the pulse of most of the corporate departments, I don't know them all, and I also know they don't know all of IT or other corporate departments and what they are working on. So I've seen projects in my past where two departments have the same idea and are trying to get the same thing done. Come to us to get that particular solution created for them, and then creating a solution for them, and both of them battling on no, this is the way it should be, and having that strife. And that's actually could be especially for corporate campaign, right, where players are the corporate, is having that inter department strife and working
Research and
against them.
development projects generally have no idea what other teams in the same
Yeah.
department are doing. Like you said, that competition creates innovation.
Yep.
Hell, that was the entire ex machina for RoboCop. One guy wanted to create RoboCops, and one guy wanted to create Ed 209s. And the RoboCop guy stepped on Ed 209's toes, and Ed 209 guy eliminated him.
Yep.
Because the company decided to go with the RoboCop project. And then in RoboCop 2, you see him trying to further that, and it goes nowhere until you actually get to the RoboCop 2, Kane, and all that nonsense. And that backfires in their face horribly, and they go back to Ed 209s everywhere.
Yeah.
And the same thing is played out with the RoboCop remake, just not as well.
But I don't know how much of a secret it is, but in Microsoft, right? So there was a product I've worked with, one of their platforms that they have, and we as a corporation were trying to support this thing, and we're like, oh, this is so slow. It's there are problems here, there's problems there, and we come to find out that application team did not talk to the database server team. So when they finally, when Gates actually left, a lot of those teams started talking to each other, and the application team, which was for the product SharePoint, started talking to their SQL Server team, and then the SQL Server team was like, "Why the hell are you doing it this way? You should be doing it this way, and this way." And boom, their product became so much faster and so much performant. So even though it's the same company, they did not even talk to each other when it came to their own applications. So like the Office application wasn't talking to any of the Windows team, right? And the Windows team didn't talk to any of the application teams.
I mean, look at the absolute shit show that surrounded something as simple as the mouse. Like the computer mouse is so ubiquitous today that nobody gives it any thought. But when it was first created, like holy shit, it was just a storm of proprietary. Like we've got to own this. Everybody else has to lease it from us. Nonsense. Like it created this environment in the corporate world of where you really saw just how cutthroat everything was going on with information technology.
Yep.
And it's so ubiquitous now that nobody gives that any thought. But yeah, when it was introduced, it was a big deal, and it put some companies out of business because they couldn't afford to license it.
Yep. Yeah, and that's another thing that I think people really didn't see back in the 90s is how much licensing has become, right? So you used to buy a product, you own the product.
Yeah.
Now it's you have a license for a year to use this product. And granted, it then becomes the responsibility of that other corporation to continue to maintain and support that product, because once you buy it, you really, there was potential of not having support anymore. But now, with licensing fees,
I mean,
you have to cover that.
yeah, just look at the video game industry. The majority of video game sales, even on consoles, are digital now, and they can remove those at any time.
Yep.
You will no longer be able to play them. Even if you have it downloaded from your system, they'll just take it off without any. They can do it without any warning whatsoever.
And that can be another type of cyberpunk campaign, right? You're a troubleshooting team who has to go off and fix whatever the corporation needs done. Kind of like, well, to the extreme, it would be, was that movie with Jude Law? Oh, fuck. Repo Man?
Oh, yeah, Repo Man.
Right. Hey,
that's a pretty underrated classic.
You missed a payment. Time to collect.
Yeah, we got to repossess your heart now. Sorry.
But those kind of campaigns can evolve, right?
Hardcore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In that story, you can see how, you can start the players off in a corporation kind of doing kind of some shady stuff, and then finally they learn either too much evil or they had to suffer the bad part of the things that they were doing, and now they are the victims, right? And
so
what are they going to do about it?
Or piss off their superiors, and their own organs are now being repossessed. The organs that were necessary for them to do their jobs. All these, and that's one of the core concepts of beginning cyberpunk characters. Like right in the 2020 book, it says sell your soul. Like, go to work for a corporation, get all these cybernetics free. And they don't take into account what happens if you just say, well, fuck that, I got my shit already, I'm just gonna go do my own thing. Well, eventually they're gonna come to collect.
Yeah, and for campaigns like that, you have to have all the players buy in on it. You do not want to have a lone wolf who's going to disrupt either your campaign or the other players' fun or any of that.
Yeah.
And that's
the core of any role-playing game, though, is everybody. If everybody's not on the same page as to what the campaign, what the tone of it's going to be, what the goals are going to be, if people are not on the same page with that, the campaign itself is eventually just going to crash and fail. That's the nature of role playing. That's why session zeros are important, to get everybody on the same page. That's why, in my old age now, I like to run themed campaigns. And that's not to say you can't have individuals with their own, goals within that setting, even if their goals are in opposition. But they've got to be on the same page as far as this is where the campaign's going. This is, how you're not necessarily expected to act, but expected to operate, I should say.
Mm.
Like if you're running a cop campaign, it's okay if one of your characters is kind of crooked and like takes a payoff every now and then. But if one of the characters is in this cop campaign is very distinctly anti-cop, that's not going to work. That is just going to bring the campaign to a crashing halt.
Right. So we got about a half an hour left. I think what we should spend the next half hour on is the topic of actual corporate character, right? So you
Okay.
kind of integrated the we've kind of given some examples of how you can put the party into the corporation and kind of use them, but then the problem, at least in the 2020, right, is the resource skill. In Red, I think they've improved it a bit in that they kind of dictate exactly what you get for the exec special ability, in which you have life insurance, you have a place to live, you also have subservience, right? People who are going to work directly with you. Versus 2020, which really didn't have that. And I like what Red, the path that Red was going down, but I think there
Yeah.
still needs a little bit more work, right? Because the other thing you want to look at is, you know, at least from the 2020 point of view, is the resources. Well, how much resources do you get? Sure, you get one or two, three employees who come out and help you, but what about, hey, I need my research team to go and do some analysis on this data I got. I need,
Yeah, and it needs to be both personal as well as professional resources. Like your corporation might pay for your private car, but they also might give you access to, a fully loaded AV4 with an assault team if you really need one.
right, and the time
Um,
and the place, right? Sure, you have
yeah.
paperwork to
Uh,
fill out and, you know, justify your need, but, you know, how do you acquire that? And I think Red would still be a skill roll to be done, and just coming up. And I think you would have to come up with your own chart of exactly what they can get from the corporation and at what difficulty level, right? Because if it's a smaller corporation, the assets and resources are going to be smaller than someone like, say, Arasaka, who has, you know, multiple AVs at every single location, you know, a strike teams within X amount of distance, right? So even
yeah, highly paid, well compensated and motivated security personnel. Um, and that's actually part. That's not only something they have access to, but that's part of their overall image that they portray to the public. Is this is what we do? We handle security, and we do it better than anybody else.
yeah. Or do you need to have your marketing team, i.e., the media's at your corporation, start putting out, you know, takedown articles? Because I'm quite
Yeah,
sure there's you know, an organization has a way in which it can publish rumors or other things to kind of distract and other things. Hey, I got arrested. What does that mean? Sure,
I
in
mean,
2020 you had corporate immunity, but how far does that go and where? Right? Like Night City, yeah, you had corporate immunity for the majority of your actions, but does it cover everything? Right? And is the local jurisdiction going to listen to it? Right? And whether or not they can charge you with something that isn't covered by the immunity. So you'll have to think about that as well when you're dealing with it. Is how law enforcement is going to behave with your interactions.
exactly. I mean, corporations are going to wield power to some extent. The bigger the corporation, the more influence they're going to have. And if you're running a game in Cyberpunk, and one of your characters is a corporate, if they're a corporate of any level of influence, then really it's best to let the campaign revolve around that, to let that be the theme of your campaign. Because why on earth would a corporate be running around with a bunch of solos and nomads if they're not in some level of control of that?
Yep.
A corporate should not be risking his life. He should not be out there in the dirt and the muck. Like, if that's happening, then that corporate is not doing a very good job of being a corporate. Sure, there are extenuating circumstances and examples. I mean, maybe they're, I don't know, maybe they're ahead of some type of outreach program or something of that nature. But in general, the corporate's going to want to be safe and secure in his air-conditioned office.
Just like the netrunners.
Yeah. Drinking his, $400 a bottle scotch and sitting in his, nice, clean pressed $2,000 suit. Like, they're not going to want to go out and risk life and limb. That's what the people they pay are for. So really the best way to incorporate a high level corporate is to have the theme revolve around corporate issues. Just like if you're going to have, a character be a high level rocker boy, well, that only works if the game revolves around, that character being a high level rocker boy. Like them putting on concerts while the rest of the team is it doesn't really mix well. Plus, a corporate is one of those 9 to 5 things where you've got to show up to work, you've got to put in the time, you've got to meet the people, you've got to have. That's what resources is all about, is who you know, and having enough reputation and credentials within that company to requisition what you need, to say, hey, I need this, and the company having enough trust in you to let you have access to those things. And if you're never in the office, never in contact with anybody, and just running around doing your own thing, well, corporation's not really going to care what you want.
Mm-hmm. The only issue I really have, especially when it comes to the corporate character and their special abilities, is that the special abilities that they do have are really tied towards employment.
Yeah.
Which, I kind of struggle with, especially when it was in 2020, right? In 2020 you rolled to determine if you're employed or not, and you could have not been employed, yet you have this skill that really requires you to have a employer that has the assets and the resources that you need. So
I mean, that's the main problem with the 2020 and the roles as they're presented is, one, too many of them are dependent on being employed, and two, most of them are so abstract that there's no two GMs who are going to interpret it the same way. So
yeah, and that's a problem when it comes to transferring characters between GMs, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, well, in the previous game, my corporate's resources allowed me to, call on an entire strike team if I needed one. And in this new game, like, I'm lucky enough if I can get a bodyguard who hates me.
Yeah.
With Interlock Unlimited, I addressed this the same way I addressed all the other roles, in that resources now gives a instead of being this weird abstract thing, it just gives bonuses
It's
to
the skills.
networking and business sense. Yeah, just two skills that directly apply to any corporate out there. Networking covers, it's basically the same as, you're basically a high-powered fixer at that point. You know people. Through knowing those people, you have access to resources and favors. And business sense lets you read the stock market. It lets you, maximize profits. Um,
Which is
and I
what
think
it
that's
should do, right? I think
yeah,
it
that's
should
I think
be
that's the way it should be handled.
a skill that, and I've been thinking about like how even in red, right? It should change because your your underlings and the bonuses you get are based upon employment, right? And if you lose employment, your special ability is no longer functional, right?
Yeah, same with being a cop. Like if you're a cop and you are suddenly fired, your authority just went to shit. You don't have any authority. You've got zero. Like you can't call on, backup from other cops. They're going to be all like, "Well, you're not a cop, so fuck off." You can't use that authority behind the badge to intimidate people anymore. Um, yeah, that's the employment being the roles being tied to employment were always a major problem with 2020, and I tried to fix that as best as I could with the roles in IU. And I'm not vain or egotistical enough uh, to even think that Interlock Unlimited had any influence on Red, but I do like the fact that in many places with the roles, they did have similar ideas and things
Yep.
did evolve somewhat similarly to how I created Interlock Unlimited.
Right.
Um, and
But
I very much like that it did evolve to that. I think it, like you said, I think they could have gone a little bit further. Um, and it's really going to be up to the GM again how they're going to interpret that, because the hard and fast rules are are still kind of abstract, and I don't think in a game where pretty much everything is well laid out for the most part, and then these special abilities are these abstract ideas. I don't think that works. I don't think it works as a mechanic, and I don't think it works as I don't think it works as I know what they were trying to do with it. They were trying to give the feel of the corporate. Um, but yeah, there needs to be some type of distinct mechanic for it, a direct application, an example of how this is supposed to be played out.
yep. And I think when they were creating red, right, is we have to have certain core elements from the previous version and the new version, right? We have, and when there's core elements, you're looking at stats, you're looking at careers, classes, however you want to call it, skills as a component, not necessarily the same number of skills, but it is as a component, and of course, cyber, right? Those are the four key elements that you have to have going forward, and I think they they try to put detail into each of the special abilities, and came up with the idea that, well, if you're a cop, you're a cop. You always have a badge. You're always part of a organization, a law enforcement organization. You're a corp. You're obviously a representing or working at a corporation, so you're always going to have these abilities. And
Sure.
I would say, and I've been thinking about like those special abilities that kind of require some type of organization backing you. and how you look at those particular roles and figure out, okay, why should that role get all these perks when, for example, a fixer character who will have pretty much the same skills or could potentially have the same skills as the corporate character, except the fixer knows where to get things, who to contact, how to make deals, and all this other stuff that the corporate special ability does not do. All the corporate special ability does is take away assets of the corporation with no extra benefit versus this fixer guy, right? And I think the real the what they should have done is taken a look at all those roles and kind of boiled down what game mechanic and influence should that particular special ability give, right? So if you're talking about an exec, well, what does an exec do? He manages people, he manages resources, he does these. So bonuses to bureaucracy, administration, sure, that would happen. But he also, I one of the concepts I think that the exec special ability should have is also being kind of a team lead, right? If you're an exec, you're in charge of people and you motivate people, and whether through stick or carrot, you are doing some type of motivation to your employees to motivate them and exceed their abilities. So I was also playing around with an idea of taking the corporate special ability and turning it into something like a support role, right? In which they give bonuses to skill rolls or bonuses to dice rolls, right? For other players. So they could assist instead of being in the background. Right. And of course, that ability also requires them to be there, right? At those missions, attending, getting in the AV with the team and getting basically the boots on the ground and being part of that, because they're going to be like, hey, you should be doing this, right? Hey, how's this working out for you, right? And kind of giving that bit of pressure versus, a regular corporation. He's just going to be like, yeah, go do this for me, hangs up and goes out to the club and parties, for the rest of the night. He doesn't want to be in harm's way, right? Because he has nothing. Well, I mean, he might have some skills to contribute to the operation, but he also has kind of not as much motivation to be there, right? Versus, creating a game mechanic that kind of forces that character to be there.
Sure. I mean, for example, look at Carter J. Burke in Aliens.
Right.
Like, he goes with the Marines, and he's the one who recruits Ripley, and they go to the planet. But when the Marines go into the processing plant, he stays behind in the truck thing, the APC, and monitors over cameras and audio what's going on, gives information through that.
But he was also assigned a task, right, by the corporation. Go get us these aliens, right? Get us some samples.
Exactly. Like, he's got a reason to be there. And when everything goes wrong, suddenly he's in the middle of the shit too.
Yeah. And not contributing.
Right. Making things much, much worse because, he's a corporate, not a combat dude. Man, he's actually a great example of a corporate in a fucked up situation like that.
Well, he's also I think if he was a player character, he would probably have been shot by the other player characters pretty darn quick.
Well, I mean, they were going to shoot him in the movie, so that all plays out.
I get that, but I have a feeling that the other players would be like, no, you're gone. not even hearing any excuses, Yeah,
he's that lone wolf character who's doing his own agenda. The lone wolf doesn't have to be the cool guy. It can be the sniveling little shit in the corner who's just got his own agenda. And yet again, it's fucking things up for everybody else.
Yep.
He's not going to be invited back for the next session. They're going to let the aliens eat that motherfucker.
Exactly. We're almost time. Is there anything else we can think of when it comes to the corporations in your campaign and the corporates in your campaign?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if one of your characters is a corporate, then you need to have thought about the corporation he's working for in much greater detail. Is it something he's the head of? Is it his own personal corporation? Is he the head of a department? Is he just a liaison to work with the characters? Like, these are things that need to be thought out of. Which corporation is it? What do they do? How do they make their profits? What are they focused on? So again, the corporation itself becomes as much a character as the actual player character. For any kind of successful corporate in a campaign as a player, that information is going to be required.
Yeah.
They're going to need to know what they can requisition, what they can rely on as far as any kind of support, and what are going to be the repercussions if they displease their corporate masters.
Exactly.
Like, what's at stake? Beyond that, I mean, corporates make an integral and interesting part of the cyberpunk mythos, of the cyberpunk game itself. Yes, in a broad sense, all corporations are going to be, if not evil, at least neutral entities that exist to make profit. And within the game world, the core theme of the game, as Mike Pondsmith states, is you're very anti-corporation and all that. But the game world isn't tied down to the philosophical ethos of cyberpunk.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're working from within to affect change. Sometimes you just completely sell out. That's the nature of characters.
Yeah. I love Raven's hammer saying, "I'm in charge of that fuck around and find out department."
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Good job, Ravenhammer RPG. And even throughout the M577 APC, right? Good job. You're my kind of people there, Raven's Hammer. And now I forgot where I was going. Oh, yeah. And as such, corporates can make compelling characters, regardless of, like I said, whether they're working against the system from within, whether they've completely embraced the system, or whether they're just doing it for a pay cut. A corporate team, a game based around, themed around playing a corporate team, is every bit as valid as anything else. And in many ways, it makes a lot more sense than everybody revolving around the fixer, like for employment and their next job and their gear and all that. If you're playing for a corporation, your gear is most likely going to be provided for the whole team. Like, everybody needs a gun. Here you go.
Agreed. And I don't.
You may even get fucking health insurance through that shit.
And I don't think you should have a corporate and a fixer in your game. I think it should be one or the other.
I don't know. I can see having both.
I suppose
corporate deals with the high level backing, but the fixer deals with the streets.
Yeah, true.
And you need a liaison for the streets. You need somebody who knows their way around.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, again, it depends on the campaign you're doing, right?
Yeah, you don't want them to focus on the same thing. Like, you don't want you don't want to work at Arasaka and then have a fixer who's, you know, an
A
arms
gun runner.
dealer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not gonna make a whole lot of sense in the long run. It might be profitable for the fixer in the short run, but it's not gonna do much for the rest of the group. Instead, if that fixer is like an information broker, hell yeah, that shit's awesome. Or a talent broker, he can find, you know, people on the street who, you know what they're doing and can fill out roles that, you know, the rest of the players are lacking, or know who to go to get the information they need. Like, yeah, I can absolutely see that working. But again, it needs to revolve around that corporate theme for it to really work. Right. Otherwise, the only choice is that everybody's super low level and just hangs out together and does jobs together until they get to a high enough level where, you know, they start being successful in their field. Because a level 8 corporate is not going to be hanging out on the streets in back alleys getting in gunfights. That's just not going to happen.
No. Unless their AV was shot down and they need to run to survive.
I mean, unless something goes catastrophically wrong.
Yep. Well, we're at time. Appreciate everyone listening on our take on corporations and corpos and how you can use real world corporations to kind of inspire your campaign stuff, as well as ideas and things to think about when you do create your own corporation in the world. So I think it was a great talk.
I mean, as a last thought, you can have just a corporation independent working with your group and not have the game revolve around that corporate. If, say, like the corporate is your fire team or group, PC group, whatever you want to call it, if they are trying to sell themselves as a corporation, that's the way you want to go. Just to throw that out there really quick.
Yep. All right. So we'll end it here. So first off, thank you, Rob Mulligan, for allowing us to sit and talk for many hours on this channel. Always appreciative.
Hooray for Cyber Nation Uncensored.
Yeah, hooray for Cyber Nation Uncensored, which, of course, you can check out at Twitch, also his YouTube, which eventually this particular episode will get up there. Please leave a comment and like on that stuff, because it does help Rob in the future. Also, you can check out his own website, which he does have a lot of what is it called? Links and other utilities for Cyberpunk Red. And he has some great rules as well that you can use to help with your Cyberpunk games.
Tons of supplemental material, gear books, all sorts of good stuff. And the Cyber Nation Uncensored channel itself hosts many live gameplay videos and things of that nature.
As well as
in addition
some tutorials,
to us, of course. Yeah, tutorials.
Yeah. And when we speak additional to us, you can check me out at my site, which is cybersmily.net. I have tons of little utilities that you could, hopefully will help in your your own games. I have more Cyberpunk 2020 stuff than Red, but then again, Red just came out, and I have yet to get to...
2020's been out since '89.
Yeah, so I've had a lot of time to think about all of that stuff and put tools and gizmos to help with either your campaign or creating characters, etc. So check that out. I have my own Discord, which is linked from my site, so you can always join there. We have some, I mean, it's not 100% active community, but there are a lot of good people there, and we have interesting conversations. And some of the old writers from Art House Orion also linger around sometimes and we'll jump in once in a while. I also hang out on several of the Reddit threads, subreddits that are out there, and I'm also on a lot. I think I'm on like 8 to 10 different Cyberpunk related Discord servers. So if there's a good chance if you do like an at
Right.
Cybersmily, it's probably going to be me, and I will always reply.
All right. I am Derek Bernier, aka Wisdom000. I run Datafortress2020.com, the world's largest and most comprehensive Cyberpunk 2020 site. I've been running it since 1996. I am also on Reddit on the various Cyberpunk 2020 Red and 2077 Reddits. I am active on Cybersmily's Discord and lurk at the Cybernation Uncensored Discord, the Artalsorian Discord, and more Cyberpunk private Discords than I care to mention. I'm on Facebook, and I'm an admin for both the Cyberpunk 2020 Facebook group as well as I think on Facebook called Cybernation or Cyberpunk Red, Dune, all sorts. It's got a fairly weird name.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I'm active on all three of those. We would absolutely love to hear from you, so feel free to reach out to any of us.
And whatever avenue you guys want, because we have several.
Yeah, whatever avenue, however you want to reach out to us, we'd love to hear from you. We love to hear your comments, criticisms, questions, complaints, anything, suggestions. We love hearing it, and we love the fact you guys still listen to us.
Yeah. Stay tuned to the next episode where we are scheduled to have Jay Gray on. So hopefully he'll have some news for us. We're crossing our fingers.
Yeah. Again, thank you very much, everybody, for listening. And like he said, we hope to see you soon. What's the next date? The 5th.
Yes, June 5th.
June 5th. Everybody, we hope to see you then.
Yep. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye.